Today we're learning about atomic structure, or the structure of an atom. Atoms are so small. This just blows my mind. It amazes me. They're tiny. We would need a billion-dollar microscope to look at an atom in class. Yet, as small as they are, they have different parts. Just like we have different parts that make up us, atoms have three parts. Those three parts are called the subatomic particles. Protons, neutrons, and electrons are the three parts of an atom. So let's look at those first. If you remember from your story about Matterville, protons, the character related to protons was Perky Patty Proton. She was my favorite because she's so positive. So protons have a positive charge. She was also a big girl. Yesterday in our Nearpod, we learned that instead of just saying big, we can be more scientific and more specific. We can say that protons have a mass of 1 AMU. AMU is it's just like pounds. If you say I weigh 100 pounds, a proton has a mass of 1 AMU. It's just a unit. If you think back to your story, Perky Patty Proton liked to hang out in the Nucleus arcade. Really, it's just called the nucleus. One other really important thing about protons is that they identify an element. So for example, if I look at this atom, I can count 1, 2, 3, 4 protons. If I look at my periodic table, number 4 is beryllium, Be. So the number of protons identifies an element, or it tells you who that element is. By looking at this, counting the protons, I know what element that is. It's kind of like a driver's license. I'm the only person in the world with my driver's license number. That number is unique. It identifies me. So protons identify the element. Next, we're going to talk about electrons. This was my least favorite character in the story because enraged Electron was always angry. He's very negative, so I'm not a fan of him. So the charge of electrons are negative. And remember, he was teeny tiny. He was a little guy. So I'm going to put tiny. Yesterday you learned that the mass of an electron is almost 0 AMU. There is a small mass, but it would be a really long decimal. So instead we just say that they have a mass of 0 AMU. Electrons are not in the nucleus. In the story, the enraged electron was mad because he wasn't allowed in the Nucleus arcade. Instead, they hang out on the energy streets, which are really called the energy levels or the Electron Cloud, either one. Last, we're going to talk about neutrons. Nerdy Nelda Neutron, in the story, she was okay. She was kind of like a stale face. She was always neutral. Neutral means no charge at all, not positive, not negative. So I'm going to put neutral, no charge. And Nerdy Nelda, she was one of the big girl sisters. So she's big, which means her mass is 1 AMU. And she liked to hang out in the Nucleus arcade with Perky Patty Proton. So the yellow subatomic particles are neutrons. Neutrons are represented by a 0 sign because they have no charge. So she's in the nucleus. And I'm going to go back and I'm going to put that neutrons have no charge, it's represented by a 0. Electrons are negative, it's represented by a negative sign. And protons are positive, it's represented by a plus sign. So those are the 3 subatomic particles, or parts of an atom. In an atom, there's also 2 locations, so let's look at those. So the 2 main locations are the nucleus and the electron cloud. In your story, this was the nucleus arcade and the energy streets. The electron cloud can be called either one. So let's start with the nucleus. The nucleus is in the center of the atom. So I'm putting that it's in the center. So it's the very center. The 2 things in the nucleus are protons and neutrons. So if protons and neutrons are in the nucleus, is the nucleus heavy or does it have no mass? Well, protons and neutrons, those are your big girl sisters, they both have a mass of 1 AMU. So the nucleus is where all of the mass is. This stores the mass of an atom. And because there's protons and neutrons in the nucleus, what would its charge be? So protons are positive, neutrons have no charge, so overall the nucleus has a positive charge. And one more thing, those protons and neutrons are packed in there really, really tight. So the nucleus is very dense. All right, our other location is the electron cloud. The other name for the electron cloud is the energy levels. You can call it either one. So the only thing in the electron cloud are electrons. Remember, electrons have a mass of 0 AMU. So the electron cloud, it doesn't have a mass. There's no mass in the cloud. It just has volume because it takes up space. So really in an atom, the nucleus is tiny and it's in the center, and the electron cloud is big and it takes up a lot of space. So we're going to say that the electron cloud has the volume. And then what is the charge of the electron cloud? The only thing in the electron cloud are electrons. So it's negative, very negative. The last thing I want to point out is, there we go, is the term valence electrons. You have not heard that yet. Valence electrons just means the electrons in the outermost energy level. So if we look at this atom, we have 1 energy levels, 2 energy levels. There's 2 energy levels on this atom. Sometimes there's more, sometimes there's less. The valence electrons is just a fancy name for the electrons that are on the outside. So not the electrons on the first energy level, not these ones, the electrons on the outermost. So I'm going to go around this energy level and I see 1, and I keep going 2. So there's 2 valence electrons. They're the same as these electrons. They just have a fancy name because they're on the outside. So we'll talk about this more in the rest of the week. Valence electrons are just the electrons on the outside. So on the other side of your notes, you have your practice, which you should be able to fill out now that you've done the left side. I'm going to do some of it with you. Let's change our color. let's go blue. So this top chart is really important. You'll see this chart again and again and again. It just might look different. Going down, you're filling in the charge for each subatomic particle. So these things are called subatomic particles. And that's a fancy word to mean parts of an atom. So if I said which subatomic particle is negative, you would say electron. It's the same thing as saying which part of an atom is negative. So let's start by filling in the charge. The charge of protons is positive. I'm just going to put a plus sign because I don't have that much space. And it's hard to write on this. All right, the charge of neutrons is neutral, or no charge, represented by a 0. And electrons is already filled in for you. They're negative. So if we go from protons to the location of protons is in the nucleus. Who else is in the nucleus? Neutrons. So neutrons are also in the nucleus. So all right, what is the location of electrons? They're in the energy levels or the electron cloud. I'm going to abbreviate. I put EL for energy levels. Now let's fill in the mass. For the mass of a proton, we could say big, but we can be more specific. We're going to say 1 AMU. For the mass of electrons, we could say teeny tiny, but we're going to be more specific. We're going to say 0 AMU. Or almost no mass at all. All right, so you're using this model of an atom. It tells you it's lithium to answer the questions below. So how many protons does it have? Well, I'm going to look in the nucleus because we're talking about protons. I see that the purple ones have a plus sign. So there's 1, 2, 3. 3 protons. How many neutrons does it have? I'm looking in the nucleus again because neutrons are in the nucleus. And I see 1, 2, 3, 4. I knew the red or pink, I knew those were the neutrons because the protons had a plus sign on them. So that means these must be the neutrons. How many electrons? Well, electrons are in the energy levels. So there's 1, 2, 3. 3 electrons. And then how many valence electrons? Remember, those are on the very outside, outermost energy level. So in this picture, there's 1 energy level, 2 energy levels. So the outermost would be number 2. I'm going there and I only see 1 valence electron. So there's 3 electrons total. 1 of those is a valence electron. And then you have one more part to do at the bottom. This is who am I? So I'm going to do the first one. The first one says, I identify an element. Who am I? Well, who is like the driver's license or the ID of the element? Who tells us who that element is? Protons. So when you're finished filling in your notes slide, you're going to copy it, which you copy by holding down Control and clicking on every slide. And then you're going to 2-finger click, or you're going to click Control C, and you're going to copy the slides.